It's time to talk about one of my favorite features on the X3, how to hyperlapse. I'm going to break the process down into 4 sections: setting up the camera, shooting the hyperlapse, editing it, and exporting it. First up, setting up the camera. So the first thing you want to do is swipe down from the top of the screen and go to settings, scroll down and go to video bitrate. Make sure that is set to high. Then go back and scroll down to video sharpness and make sure that is set to low. Then go back again to the main screen, and then we want to change the video shooting mode. So click on the bottom left of the screen and you want to make sure it's on video. You might think shooting the hyperlapse you need to be in time shift, but actually you don't. You want to be in video because it would give you more flexibility later with the speeding elements when you come around to doing the edit. So always shoot it in video. Then your resolution and frame rate, make sure it's at the highest, 5.7K. I shoot most of my things in 30, but if you want to change it to 25 or 24, here is where you'll do that. Then back to the main screen, swipe to the left. Keeping it on auto is fine. The camera handles everything very well in auto mode, so you don't need to change anything to manual. But if you want to change the white balance, here is where you'll do that. And I keep the profile on standard, but if you want to change it to log or vivid, here is where you'll do that. It's just what works best for you. I prefer this camera in standard. And then obviously make sure you've got a decent amount of charge in your battery because you'll be shooting continuous shots, so you'll see the battery drain a lot quicker. And obviously make sure you've got enough storage in your memory card. And that is pretty much it for setting up the camera. You're now ready to go and shoot the hyperlapse. The key thing to remember when shooting the hyperlapse is walk at a normal speed and keep the camera steady. Moving the camera around too much will make the final result look shaky. Remember, there's no need to point it to face anything in particular because that can be done in the edit, so just hold it up and walk. Before you start to record it, do a walk of the route you're planning to take to make sure there's nothing in your way. Keep the camera high above your head, which will make you feel a little bit stupid and you will get some funny looks from people when walking around, but just keep thinking of the final epic results. Holding it above your head gives you more flexibility when editing it to move the angle of the camera around. For example, if you just hold it in front of your face at eyes level and when editing you want to move the angle to face behind you, all you'll see is your face. Make sure you don't get a shadow of you walking because that will spoil the final result. To get cool FPV kind of shots, slowly move the camera closer to things like walls, like you can see in this example. You'll need to record a few minutes worth of footage for each hyperlapse because remember you'll be speeding it up, so recording a 3-minute clip and speeding it up times 16 will make the final clip only like 10 seconds. It's always better to have more footage to work with than too little. If you're doing a tracking hyperlapse where you'll be walking past something like a church that you want the camera to track onto, then make sure there's nothing like trees in the way because the tracking won't work properly and the end result won't look good. And now comes the fun bit, the editing process. Before we begin, apologies if you can hear the fan from my Mac in the background, but every time I open the Insta360 Studio app, the fan just keeps going crazy, so yeah. Anyway, we keep it moving. So once you've imported your hyperlapses into the Insta360 Studio app, which by the way, if you're not familiar with how to use the app, I've got a full tutorial video which I will leave in the description below, so check that out. You need to decide how you want the final hyperlapse to look. So in my mind, there's like 3 different variations, which I've played different examples throughout this video. One of them being a movement hyperlapse, so the camera angle moves from left to right or up and down throughout the hyperlapse like this. The next one being, let's call it like a tunnel hyperlapse, where all that's happening is the camera is rotating 360 left or right like this. And then you've got your tracking hyperlapse where you're walking past a building or a statue and the camera's just tracking onto it as you're moving past it like this. So you need to work out of those 3 what it is you want the hyperlapse to be as the end result. I'll go through each of them now, starting with the movement hyperlapse. Now, with the movement hyperlapse, the key thing is less is more. You don't want too many movements. So you do want movement, you just don't want too much. At the beginning, I was getting too excited and I was adding loads of movements in, but yeah, I soon figured out that, yeah, less is definitely more. So here we are walking down the beach. So you need to work out where you want the hyperlapse to start on the clip. So let's say we want it there, and what angle you want it to be as it starts. So do you want it facing behind, or do you want it facing forward, up, left or right, whatever it is, work that out to start with, because you need to lock that angle in. So to move the camera angle round, you need to get your mouse, click on the preview screen, and literally just move it left, right, up or down. That will allow you to change the angle of the camera. So for this one, I'm going to have it facing forward. The key thing to remember throughout this process, and anytime you're editing anything in the Insta360 Studio app, is keyframes. Any change you make to the camera angle that you want to save, you need to add a keyframe. So for this, with us starting here, I need to lock this position in essentially and add a keyframe. So to add a keyframe, you need to press this plus button down here. That will create this yellow dot on the timeline. That is your keyframe. So as we're walking along, you need to work out what's the next movement you want to happen. So let's say we get to about here, and I want the camera to, let's say we want it to spin up to the sky and face behind me like that. That's a pretty cool shot like that. Okay, so get it where you want it to be, like perfect. There we go, so it's a bit set, so center, yeah. Cool, so once you've got that as your new angle, you need to lock that in. So you need to add a new keyframe by pressing the button there. This creates this line between these two keyframes, which if you click on it, will bring up the transition box. Make sure it's set to smooth dissolve and not of any of the others. I find that any of the others are too fast for this. The movement is just too fast, it's the transition between them. So smooth dissolve is best to use. So you can see if we scrub between these two keyframes now, it's created that camera movement, which is going and flipping behind us. So now if we keep scrubbing through, we need to find the next point that we want the camera to move. So let's say there. And we want it to move back round, so it's now facing back where it was. But remember, if I get the camera to move down and face back where it was, it will get me in it, which will spoil the whole effect. So we can't have it coming down like that. We have to have it going back up and flipping to the sky and coming down, so we don't get any of me in it. And then we will lock that in by adding a new keyframe there. Cool, so now when we scrub from this one to this one, we're back facing forward. Now we're walking along, and let's say we want to move the camera movement towards, let's move it towards the left where the beach and sun are. So we want it there. We'll lock that in. So now when we scrub between these two, it's moving to the left. Then we're walking along, we're getting to the end of the clip. So where do we want it to kind of end? Facing forward again, I think, like that. Bring it back to where we started, and we'll lock that in. So now when we scrub between these two, it will go like that. Now when you play this back, at the moment, obviously, oh, let me turn that off. When you play this back, it's obviously at normal speed. So don't worry, we're going to speed it up in a minute, but the best way to do it is just hold your mouse down and just scrub along, so you can kind of see the movement at speed of how it's looking. Then remember, just click in the middle of each of them just to make sure smooth dissolve is on. And that is your movements pretty much done. If you're not happy with one of the keyframes, you can just click on one of them and then delete it by pressing the cross at the bottom. Or if you want to edit it, just click on the keyframe and then literally just move it around and edit it exactly like that. This box that's popped up just gives you more options of to zoom in, to zoom out, and just change the angling as well, rather than just using the mouse on the screen. But yeah, if you're happy with it, then we now need to add the speeding effect. So make sure that this white line is at the beginning where you want it to start, and then you want to press the time shift button, which is there. This will create this red box. You want to drag this along for the entire clip until the end, and then press down on the timeline, and it will create this box. Now then this box will appear. So this allows you to change the speed. So I recommend 16 personally. I think 8 is too slow and 32 is too quick, but play around with it. You know, it's what works best for you. There's no right or wrong here. 16 is just my sweet spot of where I kind of keep it when I have made my previous ones. But when you play it, it won't play at 16 times speed. It will, obviously it's playing at a quicker speed than it was originally, but it won't play at the actual speed. It won't play at that speed until you export it. So don't worry, there's nothing wrong. It just, yeah, it's just not processed it as 16 times speed yet. So if you're happy with that speed, cool, keep that in. But then you need to make sure that the motion blur is on. This will be adding motion blur as the video is playing, but you won't see it in the preview window again as you're playing it. It will only show in the exported video. So if it's not yellow, then obviously, and it's white, then just press it to make sure it's on. But usually it comes on automatically, so I recommend keeping that on to add that cool motion blur effect. And that's your movement hyperlapse pretty much done. Then you're ready to export. We'll go through the exporting process after I've showed you the next two examples. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the movement. Just remember, less is more here. Don't add too many keyframes. If you play it back and you think there's too many movements, then you can come back into it and delete some of them. Or if you want to change it, you can still edit it. It's not kind of locked in. Once it's exported, you can still edit it after and then re-export it again. But yeah, just my advice is just don't add too many keyframes in, because I find that too much movement is just not good. So yes, that's the movement hyperlapse done. It's now time to create probably my favorite hyperlapse with the X3, what I like to call the tunnel hyperlapse. So this is so simple to make and so effective once done. I find that it works best in like an alleyway type environment or something with two buildings either side, but it still works best without it as well. It literally involves two keyframes. So the first thing we need to do is get the start of the clip where we want it to start, which is going to be here for this example. And then you want to lock in that as a keyframe. But the control we're going to use this time, which we didn't use before, is the roll angle, this magic button here. So as you can see, moving that rolls it around left and right. So to start with, obviously the clip needs to be straight. So there's okay, and then we want to get to the end of the clip where we want it to end, and then you want to lock in that keyframe, and this time you want the roll angle to be spin all the way around. So you need to work out whether you want the spin to be a left spin or a right spin. So for this we'll do a right spin. So you want to spin it around all the way just before 360, so 3, 5, 6 is fine, cool. So when we scrub through now, you can see it's giving us that spin effect all the way to the end. But the key thing you need to look out for with this is you appearing in the shot. So you can see here, as we get to here, this is my hand in the corner of the screen, which completely takes away from the effects. You do not want to appear in it, even if it's just a foot or a hand. Yeah, there's a slight foot here. I go back, can you see my foot is like there? I don't think it appears anywhere else yet. So I appear like so small, but those small appearances make the final result look not good. So you don't want to be appearing anywhere in it. So to get rid of that, go back to the first keyframe, and you want to change the view to a natural view, which will crop it in a bit. So now when we play it, you can see that where I was appearing here before, I'm now not appearing because it's cropped it in a bit. But what you need to do is, because we've changed the view on the first keyframe, you need to change the view on the last keyframe to natural view as well, because if you don't, what's going to happen is as it gets to the second keyframe, it's going to like start zooming out, which could then make you appear towards the end. So just scrub through it and make sure you don't appear around the edges of the screen. Just keep an eye out around the edges of the screen, because trust me, once you export it, if your hand appears or your foot appears in it, it just spoils the whole hyperlapse, so you don't want that. And that is pretty much it. It's literally just 2 keyframes. You can obviously do the reverse, where you could have the beginning point starting facing behind you, so as you are walking, it's kind of like going backwards into the alley rather than facing forwards, which would be the same, just literally 1 keyframe there and 1 keyframe there. And then just make sure you've got smooth dissolve as your transition, and then you're ready to add your speed element. So go to time shift, and then your red box will appear. Drag it all along to the end, and then make sure you change it to, I recommend, like I said earlier, 16. So you can see that's now made it a 10-second clip. If you think it's too fast, you can obviously change it to slower, or even go even faster than that. But yeah, like I said earlier, 16 is the sweet spot for me. Make sure motion blur is on, and then that is pretty much it for your tunnel hyperlapse. Really cool effect. And now we move on to the tracking hyperlapse. So remember earlier when I said to make sure that you didn't have anything like trees and stuff in the way when you're trying to do this shot? Well, it's because I learnt the hard way here when I was filming this, and there was loads of trees in the way that came, and I didn't realise till after. So yeah, so just make sure it's a clear path and there's no trees, because the tracking doesn't work the best when it's not. Anyway, let me stop blabbing and I'll show you what I mean. So you don't need any keyframes here for this bit, because you're just going to get the software to track it itself. So let's start it from here where there's no trees and move the camera around like that. And then what you want to do is you want to go to deep track, click on that, and then it will ask you to create a box. So get your mouse and drag a box around the object you want it to track, and then press start tracking, and then it will literally keep that object in the middle of the screen and start tracking it through. But what you'll see in a minute is as the trees start to come in its way, it starts to go a little bit mad, and it will stop tracking without you telling it to stop, which is not really what you want to happen. So that's why if it was a clear path, it would just track it until you tell it to stop. Whereas in a minute, what will happen, you'll see when the trees come in the way, it will stop it automatically because it loses sight of the object. So it's doing well now. Got this tree coming in the way. It's doing well, it's doing well, it's doing well. Oh, it's doing well. Oh, it's going a little bit mad. It's going a little bit mad. It's going a little bit mad. Going a little bit, okay, it's giving up. Okay, so I didn't press stop there, it just stopped automatically. So what would usually happen is if there's nothing in its way, it would continue tracking until you press stop. So you can see here when I scroll through, it's kept it in the center, which is great, but because of these trees, obviously it hasn't finished it all the way along. I would have probably liked it to track it to at least there, but it didn't because of the trees. So that's why I said earlier, make sure there's nothing on your route. Walk your route first and make sure there's nothing in the way, because it will affect it later. And I didn't realize until I got back, and it was too late obviously to just go back there to shoot it. So yeah, that is the tracking kind of side of it done. So let's say it did track it all the way up to here, and I kind of then just wanted that, then I would add my speeding element to speed it up, exactly how we did earlier, time shift, and then bring it to there, and then change it. I would probably not put 16 times speed on this because it would just make it too ridiculously small. Yeah, look at that. So for this, maybe 4 times speed, so it's fast but not too fast. And again, you don't know how that looks until you export it, but if not, then you can kind of come back to it and you can press on the red box, and then you can change the speed to go even slower to 2 times speed. And that's how you use the tracking tool. The software does a really good job with it when there's nothing in the way of it, and obviously you can use that on statues, buildings, people, cars, or whatever it is. And yeah, have some fun with it. It's now time for the final piece of the puzzle, the export. So down on the timeline, you've got your marker in and your marker out. You need to make sure that these are set correctly, because anything within these markers will be exported. So if you just wanted this section where the red is, and you leave the markers where they are, everything before and after will be exported. So you can change the marker position by using these buttons up here, or you can drag it along yourself, and then now everything just in between these two markers will be exported rather than the whole clip. Once you've repositioned that, you need to press the magic export button, which is this yellow button in the bottom right. Make sure export reframed video is selected. Change the file name if you want, and then choose where you want it to be saved. Then go down to bitrate and change that to 50. Anything above 50, I haven't seen any difference, but I have seen a difference in the quality with it below 50. So I don't know if you want to play around with it yourself, but from my experience, the sweet spot is 50 to keep the quality nice and high. The only thing I've noticed increasing it by 50, well, increasing it more than 50, is the file size is bigger rather than the quality is better. So yeah, 50 is cool. Then the resolution, you can change this to put the 4K dimensions in if you want to, 3840 by 2160, and then everything else remains the same, and then you're ready to press start export. And then once it's exported, it will become a normal video file, which you can import into your normal video editing software and color correct it, add music, and make it look all fancy. And that is how to hyperlapse. Play around with it all, have some fun, and if you want to check out my full Insta360 Studio tutorial along with my cinematic videos that I created with the X3, I'll leave the links in the description below.